So, the future of the web, thanks a million, Bharat. He's going to hold on with us here. It's an area that really does suffer a lot of hype and hyperbole, and one for which we wanted a true pro as session chair. So, Pete Townsend is an early stage startup investor. He's an advisor, a board director, and a mentor. Today, he leads the Launchpool Web3 Accelerator from here in Dublin. So, who better for our session on Web3? Will you please welcome to the stage Pete Townsend?
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone here. Really appreciate the invite to come and talk to all of you today. I've got three wonderful panelists here behind me, so I'm going to sit down. And just what we're going to do today is that, thankfully, Bharat has warmed us up and has told you a bit about Web3 and told you a bit about NFTs. We're going to look at the wider risks and opportunities around Web3, but also, as we talked about, double down into Web3 communities, that being the most important part of Web3. So, to get started with that, I would like to ask each one of my panelists to just give a brief intro on where they're coming from. Anne gave a wonderful intro to me, so thank you, Anne. Laura, could we start with you, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hoping you're hearing me okay. My name is Laura Walsh, and I am the CEO of GamiFi.gg, which is a blockchain-based gaming IDO platform. So I notice I'm getting a bit feedback here, so they're going to turn me down a little bit. So I also am the partner liaison with Pete at the Launchpool Web3 Techstars Accelerator. So I've spent quite a bit of time in Dublin over the past few months, and I'll be coming back in June. I go back in the let's say the Web3 space, but mostly the crypto space since late 2017. We'll not go back any further about talking about the Bitcoin white paper because that's how everyone starts out. But really cut my teeth on it in 2017. I worked at two different protocols. I started at the NEM protocol, stayed there about 3 years, then moved to Near protocol, then moved on from protocols to get a bit of a wider view of the entire crypto ecosystem rather than just being a protocol maximalist, and moved to Launchpool, where I was COO. So that is a pre-IDO platform, and we're not going to get into the brass tacks of that, but it's a little bit like VC investing for retail. And then this November, I branched off and did the IDO platform. So I'm the CEO of that. It's called GamiFi, and it brings together blockchain-based gaming, esports, and tries to bring those communities together, which I'll go into a little bit later, can be a bit contentious.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Kevin, how about you? Why don't you give us a brief intro?
I'm an artist. My work deals with matters of identity and value. I'd be best known probably in Dublin for the Faces of Ireland exhibition I had up at the airport for 3 years. But I work across a number of generative media, including blockchain, which I've been using as a method in my practice since 2013. I work with artificial intelligence, and I'm excited to offer up today what I think might be a vision of a Web 3.0, which could be a little bit in opposition to some of my fellow panelists.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. We need that. We absolutely need that. And Bharat, you've given us an intro already, but just a brief hello once again, yeah?
Oh, hey there. To maybe add something new, I actually have been interested in blockchain for a long time. My first, I read a book 10 years ago about cryptography, not going back to Satoshi, no, but more of like understanding the technology behind it from a professor in the University of Pennsylvania. And I was blown away by the cryptography and the possibilities. So that's how my journey started. And I did 3 or 4 years ago try unsuccessfully start an altcoin during the altcoin bust. I did learn a lot from it. I also swore that I'll never come back to it because of the trauma. But here I am, deeply into it. But I think it's definitely a different paradigm today, and I feel like it's community driven, and also the technology that was nascent at that time has a lot more promise today, thanks to amazing compute power and innovation there. So those are all things that excite me, and I can't wait to apply this to everything that we do within our company and beyond. So,
great. Thank you, Bharat. Anyone wake up this morning and get excited about the fact that Bitcoin had dropped down to 26,000 overnight and went in and bought Bitcoin while they were eating their peanut butter and banana toast for breakfast? Show of hands. Yeah, I'm in this for the long term, folks. So just to give you a bit of a snapshot, as Ann mentioned, I lead the Launchable Web3 Techstars Accelerator, and we are working with 10 companies right now, 10 projects that we selected back in February, and Laura and the team at Launchpool and Alphabet were very close with me while we did that, and still very close, obviously. And one of the things that we say to these projects when we're talking about Web3, they know this, but we look for them to embody this definition of Web3 that Chris Dixon from the venture capital firm A16Z, or Andreessen Horowitz, talks about, is that Web3 is the internet owned by builders and users and orchestrated by tokens. What does orchestrated by tokens mean? By tokens, what you're trying to do is you're trying to incentivize behavior. And incentivizing behavior of people across different walks of life, all engaging virtually within this community, within this mini economy that you're building. What you're really trying to do is to create these symbiotic relationships between those that are building the projects, those that are developing on top of what's being built, those that are using them. And that we see many of these pockets of communities developing. Are you going to see this with every Web3 project? Absolutely not. But what we look for in this accelerator program is companies that have the potential, projects that have the potential to do this. And that where what they build, they'll eventually be able to step away from, and they just become users of the network that they've built, which is a much different context than Web 2, where you've got these big brands that own big platforms and that are engaging with society that way. So with these communities that people are building being the most important thing, you can see these online. If you go to platforms like Discord, you can see these communities either thriving with thousands and thousands and tens and thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of members, or you see them sleeping. And that's a really good sign to look at to see which ones you may want to get involved with, what are the active ones, okay? What we're going to do today is that because we've got, with Web3, encompassing a lot of these different technologies that are making these communities possible, things like cryptographically secured assets, which is a mouthful. People just refer to that as crypto. I don't think the currency part of that is actually I say it so much, I think it does it a disservice. These are digital assets. Okay, and so crypto being the first part of that, DeFi or decentralized finance being another big part of that, but also what people refer to as NFTs or non-fungible tokens that Bharat was talking to us about. And NFTs being really the most popular things being packaged as NFTs right now are digital art, collectibles, and other kinds of media, music, as we mentioned, okay? And what I'd like to do is just get some of the insights and thoughts from the panelists here on what are some of the things that they're seeing in the Web3 space with regards to these communities building up around NFTs as being good examples of kind of the optimistic view of where this is all headed, and then we'll get into some of the risks in the second part of the discussion. So Laura, maybe starting with you, given your vantage point as CEO of GamiFi, and seeing multiple communities coming together around blockchain gaming. Could you maybe share a couple of stories around what you're seeing with regards to how these communities are coming to life?
Sure, thanks, Pete. if you're in anything to do with the gaming space or esports world, or even a bit of a casual console gamer, I'm still a console gamer. I'm unapologetically a console gamer. I don't think you'll be able to get my controller away from me ever. You'll see that NFTs kind of burst onto the gaming scene more from a play to earn. And I don't like that term, but we're getting into semantics. I like play and earn because I don't like your joy becoming a job. So the esports or the gaming community and fans had a bit of a, I'll be diplomatic here, a bit of a, let's say enthusiastic disagreement with the inclusion of NFTs into, let's say, their legacy studios or their favorite games. And some studios that decided they wanted to put NFTs into their studios or into their games faced pretty strong backlash. We've been working at GamiFi as well with the new generation of upcoming indie studios and individually games built by individual teams, indie teams, rather than big studios. And they're integrating NFTs from the start, from the word go. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there where the bigger studios and the legacy guys are trying to slap NFTs maybe onto things that aren't ready for NFTs, or they really don't fit with the gameplay. And then you have the indie developers coming up with, Web3, crypto native, NFT native games. And they're kind of hitting a clash right now. But we see there's a bit of capitulation on both sides. Some big studios are backing off and not putting NFTs in. Most indie studios are just surging ahead anyway, doing what they want. And I know I say this a lot, but it's akin to a conversation I had with a game studio head for mobile gaming. And he said, the vitriol I'm seeing right now against NFTs in games is akin to what I saw when the freemium model started in mobile gaming. And he said, and the thing is, it took over, and that's the gold standard basic baseline for any mobile game made now is it's freemium with add-ons. So for the people who hate NFTs, and that's it's your prerogative, it's fine. I think in some things it will be an inevitability, and I think gaming might be one of them. Now, I am aware of the technological restrictions to having, let's say, cross-chain or NFTs across different games. There are a bunch of different restrictions technologically. Integration is a bit hard, but the development platforms are getting just much more sophisticated by the day. And if you're even anywhere near the crypto ecosystem, you know that a week here is about 6 months in any other industry. So anything can change and pivot just incredibly fast. And the pace of growth, the pace of change is staggering. So I don't see that it's going to be too far before a AAA game studio just says, hey, this type of NFT, this armor you buy for this game is going to be applicable across all of our, say, RPG games. And this code is just going to have to work, and your avatar is just going to be able to use it. Or where you have your in-game assets. I've got a loot box, I've got XP, I've got this really, really rare sword. And the next RPG game is going to have to honor my my XP, my HP, everything to do with the sword. May not be exactly like that, but I see something like that coming down the line. So for community-wise, it's a little bit of a delicate balancing act now, bringing these two communities together, but we're kind of, we're committed to having them kind of at least talk to each other, because we find we have more in common than we do not at the end of the day, because we all love games. So
absolutely,
that's the best way to go about it.
Absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I've heard a couple of stories around this, and that, folks saying, listen, I may not want to take my Ferrari that is packaged as an NFT and take that out of, what's the game? One of the big Grand Theft Auto. Take my Ferrari out of Grand Theft Auto and drive it into Among Us, right? But what you may want to do is take your sword, take your armor out of Roblox and bring it into Fortnite. And people say, why would you actually want an NFT of a rock? Well, maybe not today, but at some point when you're walking around that VR world and you get locked out of your digital house, can't find your digital key. Well, I've got a digital rock that I can throw through my digital window to get back into my digital house, to go into my digital bed and sleep digitally. Okay, so this is where some of these ideas are going. Kevin Abosch on that, and thinking about digital rocks, but also thinking about digital potatoes, which obviously you are wonderfully famous for. Can you maybe share some of your stories from an artistic perspective on the building up of these communities around digital art, digital media, digital collectibles? Can you share an insight or two?
For sure. So if we think about everything that pre-NFT, the so-called traditional art world, this new space brought a different demographic, if you will, of collectors. You could say some of them weren't sophisticated, but that sounds elitist. I had a lot of collectors who maybe weren't collecting art before, who for the first time in their lives, something about maybe the fact that my work in particular was generative, or that it was easily accessible without the baggage of having to go into a gallery and educate yourself on the spot. I found that a new crop of collectors entered my life, and so in March of 2021, I released 1,111 NFTs, a project called 1111. And in that project, it did very well in the sense that they were all collected, and I had more collectors with my work than ever, and a community of sorts did emerge. But I didn't do anything, I think, to really encourage that. I don't do Discord. I'm on Twitter. I had a Telegram, but it was a kind of a unidirectional communication. It's not that I wouldn't want to communicate in both directions with my collector base, and sometimes that happens, but I just don't have the time with a couple of kids and everything going on in life, and some of my work is politically charged, and I've had some nastiness with the public and death threats, etc. So it's just something that I choose not to engage with. And what's interesting though is many of my contemporaries, peers, fellow artists, they've taken cues, I think, from commercial projects, the so-called PFP projects, like the Avatar, Bored Apes, and all of these businesses. These are essentially startups who are whether there's a real product or a product that's going to be developed down the line. There's a sort of a best practice has emerged, which means you have a Discord, you develop a community, which we can talk about later. We develop a community, you engage with that community, ostensibly to get them excited to sell more of whatever you're trying to sell. Financial windfall, that's not my primary motivation, so I don't optimize for that. And that's, in my case, what I'm saying is the community emerges out of their engagement with the work. And in my case, I try to redefine the relationship between collector and art in novel ways, using novel and emergent technology, so that the relationship, which I think for hundreds, if not thousands of years, has been rather static. A collector buys a piece of work and let's say they hang it on the wall. It's probably going to be the same work the next day and the next day. I'm playing with this relationship to the extent that the collector isn't even necessarily in the driver's seat. That there might be psychological levers used within this relationship that would keep someone from selling a work. They might have a second thought about it. They wake up the next day and the work is in some way has changed. And changing the value proposition, not financial value proposition, but somehow amplifying the intrinsic value of this virtual token. In any case, and I have a particular group of collectors that have sort of informally organized around this project.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate that insight. Bharat, when you were on earlier, you were talking about the realization or the lesson learned about community first, product second, brand third. Can you talk a little bit about how specifically you went about building up that community around timepieces and how that looks today?
I mean, I think it's been a year, but like Laura mentioned, it's like a week in this world is like 1 year. So I feel aged, like maybe 10 years. So I think where we started was pretty naive from a very Web2 centric mindset where we will put out something out there with a brand name and somebody's going to consume it, right? They're going to come and get it. And just because of the brand name. And we were so wrong. I think we quickly realized that building this sort of coalescing around the community and shared interest was an important part. In fact, we didn't even have a Discord, but when we actually started, we actually borrowed a channel from a Cool Cats community. And then quickly realized after our first drop that then we got to get going on this. So I basically sat on a Saturday and built our Discord. So that's how it came about. So if you want to know how it actually came about. So, and then people who actually bought the fascinating part is people who actually bought the NFTs wanted to contribute. So they said, okay, how can I help you? Somebody from Malaysia actually built the scaffolding for the Discord and said, here, I'm giving you the keys, take it. Now, build on top of this. Somebody else came in and helped build the security around it. And then somebody else helped curate the different artists. So one of the artists came in, famous artist, Malaysian artist, Red Hongi. She's a cover artist for Time. And I've never met her before because she's on the cover of Time and it's very sort of distant relationship with artists. And all of a sudden she's on our Discord and saying, hey, I can help you rally this community because people own my art today. So, and then she was one of our very strong sort of advocate into our Discord. So, and I started seeing an interesting pattern emerge where now we're in direct communication with people who actually bought the NFT, right? Or people who actually created the art. Otherwise, it wasn't possible. So in media world, like you, and this is, most media companies are notorious for this, where they just like, it's like a loudspeaker, right? It's a one-way communication, and we'll just figure out if you like it or not by getting the metrics and seeing if the audience is resonating or not. And then we create cohorts and see which one's good retention and bad retention and or adjust for it. Here it's like direct communication. They'll tell you if they hate you. They'll tell you if you suck, you know, and then, okay, take the feedback and adjust, right? So that's why I feel like when Laura says 1 week is 1 year, you know, you're adjusting rapidly. And this feedback from the community was very important for us. And then we completely changed our approach towards NFTs, our brand around it. We went full force on creating a native crypto brand because on the other hand, a lot of people in the community or people who are looking at this are also looking for your demise. Okay, they're like, okay, you're successful. Let's make sure that you're not, right? So, and I come from a startup, building 2 startups. You know, I call myself a cockroach. You know, this is I take this as a challenge, and let's show them how it's done best. So bringing my Web2 expertise, the professionalism, the the team's professionalism, the customer savviness, the making sure we provide the most value to the customers. We're bringing all of that into the Web3 community, where on the one hand, it's a very sort of day trading, scam, all of that is around, right? So when you actually provide a pure value-based approach, it actually resonates, and then it took off. Okay, so as we consistently started doing this, it took off, and then still we get a lot of feedback. Even today, we get feedback, right? So and we adjust from it, and we show up. So we're 4 founders that we created this, and we show up. Like today, there's a town hall, and every week we do a town hall in our Discord, and all the 4 founders show up. I didn't show up today because I'm here with you all, but the 3 others are there. So and showing up is 50%. Of course, making sure that we pivot and adjust to the community needs is rest of it, and then we provide continued value with everything we do. So Pete, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that does answer the question, Bharat. Thank you very much. And just to kind of look at this on a bit of a wider lens as well, folks, we've got, one of the big themes of the accelerator program we're running is to make Web3 more accessible to the masses. And you'll see that in a lot of the companies that we have in the program. And that, how do you make things accessible? Well, storytelling helps. There's a couple of stories I wanted to highlight, books that were quite prescient in pointing to where we're all going with this. The first one being Snow Crash, that was written in the 90s by Neil Stephenson, where they first introduced the word metaverse. The second being Ready Player One, written by, I think it was Ernest Cline in 2013, that really painted the picture for all of this. And in both of these books, you can see NFTs, you can see decentralized finance, you can see tokens in general, you can see blockchain, you can see crypto. And that, the one thing about both of these stories is that they were taking place in a dystopian future, where people were escaping their problems by going into the metaverse and having these immersive experiences, rather than solving the problems in the real world. Okay, and so that's one thing that we just all need to be careful of, is that as its technology becomes more and more possible and more available, like I said, crypto, blockchain, NFTs, tokens in general are all just building blocks of the metaverse, okay, and of these metaverse worlds, these immersive experiences. We need things like VR to get a bit better, but it really needs, these building blocks are allowing the financialization of things to make the experience, to make the experience valuable for people, to incentivize behavior, like we were mentioning at the beginning. Laura, looking towards the future with all of this, what do you see are some of the ways in which we can avoid this dystopian future while still embracing this new technology? Not even new technology, this technology that's now present and live in tons of people's hands. It will continue to get better, but that will continue to expand and become more accessible. How do you think we do this the right way?
Well, personally, I'm not a huge VR fan, just because it makes me incredibly nauseous. My daughter would disagree. She'd live on her Oculus if I let her. I think, personally, I prefer AR, augmented reality. I find that's kind of a better merge between the real world and the virtual world. And we can get into metaverses and how long we've had actual metaverses. If you think about it a bit too hard, and I'm not going by the AZ16 definition of a metaverse, which means fully decentralized and fully autonomous and not owned by anyone. If we just expand our mind a little bit about metaverses, it's The Sims, it's Roblox, it's Minecraft, it's really any immersive game that is an open-ended world, any MMORPG almost really, that's an open-ended world that you're in and building things and creating value. But going back to your point, I'm hoping we're not getting dystopian. The news cycle is not very positive lately. So unfortunately, we're kind of actually following the trajectory of these books, which is not the best way to go about it with war and with food shortages and supply chain shortages and virtual school. I would hope that we were able to kind of pull it back a little bit and balance out a little bit more. I could say that things like stepping, where everyone's counting their steps anyhow on their watches or on their phones. This gives the financial incentive to finish your steps, and you get tokens for each step. This is not the first project to do this. This is just the one that's the most funded, most well-funded. So I remember doing this with a Japanese wallet back in, I want to say 2018, 2019. They did the same thing. It just didn't take off the way STEPN did, and it didn't hit the zeitgeist at the right time. So hopefully we find a happy medium where we're not having to escape as much, and we are more in touch with our world. And I personally prefer AR, which is augmented reality, whether that's a glass, whether that's on your phone, but you're still walking around in your natural environment instead of, as in Ready Player One, you're in a little, RV camper on top of a bunch of other RV campers in a tower that's probably going to fall and kill everyone within it. And there's still school, there's still face-to-face interactions, but that we seamlessly integrate the technology into our interactions so that we're still interacting and not taking away from our actual human to human interactions. And that might be a bit philosophical, but that's what I'm hoping for, rather than the full dystopian rabbit hole.
Yeah, I hear you. And I won't ruin the movie, because the Ready Player One movie, which wasn't as good as a book, wasn't nearly as good as a book. They had a panacea for this at the end of the movie, but I won't ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen it. Kevin, with looking towards the future and thinking about digital art and your role in all of this, do you see, what is your optimistic view on how this can all unfold, and in terms of how the world embraces digital art and how that becomes just normal, and the way that art is appreciated, the way art is consumed? How do you see this unfolding?
Well, I respect your determination to keep me optimistic. So I could say, well, let's just hope that blank doesn't unfold. I think it's about what we've heard here about Bharat's vision and implementation of Web3 is all very positive. But I think there are a lot of people, as Laura was saying, in a lot of hurt this week. Many of them desperate to be part of a community or a tribe or a family, and looking to people who ostensibly have more knowledge in this space than they do, and believing the things that they're told. We're told that there's a revolution of sorts going on, this Web 3.0 promise, which is a utopian vision. And I'm so happy you used the word dystopian. Well, one, as we know, utopia doesn't exist, and well, neither does dystopia for that matter, but there's a very fine line between the two. And there's a lot of focus on identity centrism. There's groupthink, which manifests out of large groups of people who probably have great intention, most of them, want to be part of something, but there's a lot of money at stake here. Billions of dollars are being pumped into Web 3.0 for better or for worse. And you better believe it that when someone steps out of line and even questions the future, potentially like we are here, there'll be those that want to stomp them down, because you're not going to get in the way of a multi-billion-dollar train, okay? You're just not. Now, I'm a blockchain child, if you will, even though I'm 52. But I love the blockchain, right? I just think we need a bit of healthy it's not even skepticism. We just have to have a dose of real cycle and blind optimism, and you throw logic out the window. It allows those who are aware that this is the case to further exploit us. And a lot of what we democratization and gender equity and creative sovereignty and all these lovely, warm, fuzzy concepts in practice, and I can only speak as an artist in the art world, we're not really seeing it in the art world. Just a statistic, in the United States, a fraction of a percent of those who identify professionally as artists earn more than $10,000 a year, so below the poverty level. Now, what's happened now with billions of dollars worth of NFTs being sold across a number of platforms, has this changed? Well, certainly there are those who did not make money from their art, making money now. But statistically, this hasn't changed. And statistically, the gender representation has not changed. The racial representation has not changed yet. You know, just because we, you know, and what I'm saying is Web 3.0 isn't going to overnight fix the systemic problems we have in the Web 2.0 world. We're still at the mercy of those with the big bank accounts, and that's it. That's not, look, I'm not pissing on anything. You know, right?
I hear you. Great.
I think the future can be bright, but we just have to be vigilant.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We absolutely do. There's so many lessons we can learn from science fiction. Bharat, just quickly for you, do you want to maybe just give us a view into your biggest source of optimism for the future of Web3?
Yeah, well, I mean, by the way, I resonate with everything that Kevin just said, even though I've seen this in real world, right? I mean, it's the same instincts that exist in Web 2 exist in Web 3. So I can give you an example where one time I was in a Shark Tank style pitch. You probably are going to see this in Techstars Web3 accelerator where you see the applications. I was in this Shark Tank style pitch with like well-known VCs around analyzing this startups, around 10 of them. And guess how many were female founders in there? 0. Yeah. Okay. How many were non-white? 0. So, and here we are, mostly crypto bros between 22 to 32 years old, all male, pitching to the major VCs, and getting money, right? And getting exposure. And I started thinking, like, what is going on here? So I am pretty sure there are lots of brilliant crypto folks that are not in the community represent here. So so I went on a search to find out what is going on. This time when Clubhouse was big, right? So I expressed this in Clubhouse, and then all of a sudden I started seeing women who reached out and saying that, hey, we've been doing work on crypto. And then I talked to all of them, and turns out they were a lot more smart than what I looked at in the Shark Tank style pitch. So what is the disconnect here, right? So it's the same instincts that we have in Web 2 that exist in Web 3. So it's basically connections, curry favors, you know, so all of that, and looking at people that look like you or have the same, and then promoting them, right? So I think we have to be intentional when it comes to diversity and inclusion. The same instincts that we had in Web 2 exist in Web 3 to remediate these, right? So it needs to be intentional. And I would encourage the same for the Techstars Accelerator, right? Where be intentional in bringing on the people that, and diversity and inclusion. And we've taken that approach within time. So we've been very intentional about it, because when we look around, we want to be in the sort of beacon of light here, at least as an example, right? So that's what motivates me as well, to see people that are like from a diverse and include people, but also your idea of inclusion can be very different how you implement within Web3. So that's another aspect as well. We can go through it another day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bharat. And I think it's a great point to conclude on is on the diversity side, and even though that Ready Player One movie wasn't nearly as good as the book, there was some strong diversity elements in there that really painted the picture of allowing people to just be themselves. right? And that I think that's what this is all about, because when you can truly be yourself, that's where you bring the most to the party, okay? And so with that, I just wanted to thank our wonderful panelists, Laura Walsh from GamiFi, Kevin Abosch, our wonderful artist that's with us here today, as well as Bharat Krish from Time Digital. So thank you so much for your contributions today. Really appreciate it. And just to leave the audience with one thought, just be careful out there. To quote Brian Chatton from the Dublin rock band, Fontaines, DC, bring your own 2 cents. Never borrow them from someone else. Okay? Thanks so much, everyone.